nevertheless, those items are owned by Blizzard. Is it possible to create video games where items are owned by the people like outside of Blizzard? And do you think in like a half century from now we will all live in those games and we'll forget the physical space even exists?
Well, yeah, that's definitely possible. I look at CryptoKitties. That's a great example of that.
Can you explain what CryptoKitties is?
Well, it's basically just a video game that kind of lives on a blockchain, and the creatures within the game can breed with each other and create new CryptoKitties, and you can own them. So it's like some sort of dystopian Tamagotchi with lots of money behind it. but anyway, the thing is, those assets actually have a blockchain-based representation. And so whether the infrastructure that hoists up that game off-chain goes on or off, because that ledger exists outside of the game, any person can come in, replicate it, restore it, and turn it back on. Sans intellectual property. So yeah, it's completely possible to break your architecture up where you have a notion of the player part, and then you have a notion of the experience part, and you can interchange experiences, almost like you do cascading style sheets or something for, have different presentations, and the ownership of the underlying layers, the players. So yeah, that's definitely doable. And frankly, that's what's going to happen in the gaming world because there's so much value in that. I mean, everybody wants play, and right now the model is you make a game, you sell licenses, and you have a huge surge of people at the beginning of the game buying the video game. And then you have this long tail, but you've gotten almost 95% of your value in the first 6 months. And you have a huge churn rate. The odds are the vast majority of people won't be playing the game within 12 months. But if you can create an interactive game where there's an actual economy inside the game, then you have EVE Online or Second Life or any of these things where you have people playing for 10 years and there's like people buying virtual real estate and all these other things. And you as the game developer actually don't have to create a lot of content. So your long tail gets a lot fatter and it generates a lot more revenue, and your cost of operating a system is fairly fixed or diminishing. So the economics align for doing exactly what you're talking about. And I think it'll get done.
Well, I just saw recently sort of this calculation that people played WoW and Fortnite for 140 billion hours.
Yeah.
So, and that's without the economic incentives there. So do you think it's possible that like most of our economy in the future will be people playing video games essentially? Like, okay, so one vision of the future, especially with AI and automation, that people like we get wealthier and wealthier. There's this kind of rising GDP for the entire world, and then people are losing their jobs, but they're still are well off enough to be able to have a high quality of life. So we're all looking for meaning, and the meaning we'll find is by playing video games. And now there's this extra levels, like you can be a Bill Gates within a video game world, in the digital world, as opposed to the physical world. Is that, do you think that's the future?
You just want to have the Westworld. If you can't tell the difference, doesn't matter. Line uttered to you. Did you ever interview Yuval Harari? Was he?
Not yet. Eventually.
Well, yeah, I guess Homo Deus. That's kind of like the roadmap there, right? This hedonistic dystopia where everybody just lives wired into some simulation. And there's some movies about that, Ready Player One, and the other one was Surrogate, and so forth. So yeah, Hollywood has certainly visualized what this could be, but I'm not so pessimistic in that respect. I do believe that the video game world is evolving at an amazing pace. If you look at where Unreal is at, is just incredible, the latest Unreal Engine. And within 1 or 2 more ticks of that clock, the iterations, so 5 to 10 years, the photorealism will be so good that it'll be hard to distinguish between real life and video games. And, the hardware is almost there. So the question is then, when you have photorealistic experiences where you've successfully traversed the uncanny valley to a point where it's good enough, then will virtual reality be more desirable than actual reality? And for the vast majority of people, the answer is probably yes, because actual reality is tough. It's hard, But then your knowledge of that you live in a virtual world actually becomes a problem for you. So there's going to be this kind of sad, dark industry where people try to create amnesia, where they're not aware that they're inside the virtual world. And so that's an interesting...
Why is it sad? I mean, it's almost like...
Because it's not real. But if you could forget that it's not real, then you believe what you're experiencing is real.
Yeah, but yeah, so what? You forget, like you forget all the ugly parts of life, which is the physical, the meat space, and then you just get to enjoy video games.
But it's always lurking in the back of your mind that you're in the Matrix.
Well,
You
that's
have to not be in the Matrix. That's just why the bald dude in the Matrix was like, I want to be rich and have a beautiful wife and eat a steak every day. You know, he didn't want to know he was in the Matrix.
so you would take the red pill, not the blue pill.
Well, no, hang on. It depends on how good the virtual world is, Lex.
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Is, I mean, isn't that what most of the beautiful experiences about human life are? Is forgetting for a moment, for a time, like the mess of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what love is you forget, like all of a sudden everything is beautiful. But like the reality is you're going to lose that person and most likely love will fade. And no matter what, even if it doesn't, you're both going to be dead soon.
Jesus Christ.
So I'm taking the blue pill on that one.
You went full Ernest Becker on me, man.
Okay.
But no, I get what you're saying though, and actually, but then it begs the question: how do we? And it goes back to the very first question you asked in this interview, which is like, how do we know we're not in a simulation, or is Bostrom's concepts or these ideas like real? Well, it's entirely possible that we are, and that we desire to be, because the real world is horrifically dystopian or bad, or maybe we actually don't exist. We're completely virtual, and does it matter? And I'd argue that it probably doesn't at some certain point. If you're at the end of your life in your 90s dying of cancer, the fact that you can live out being young, healthy, and 25 is probably a desirable thing, and no one would ever complain about that. Where it becomes problematic is if the vast majority of society enters this virtual simulacra of reality, and as a consequence, nothing works because there's no one to do anything. Society falls apart in that respect. There's no desire to do anything in the real world. Innovation stops. The desire to actually do real work stops because you're always inside this virtual economy. So I don't know. It's an interesting question, but drawing it back more to where we're at today, the evolution factors are there. VR is evolving at a very rapid rate. The game engines are just incredible today, and they're really doing amazing things. And there seems to be an overwhelming desire for people to escape the harshness of where they live, just by evidenced by how many billions of hours have been spent playing video games. People still play Skyrim. Yeah. It's a good game.
It's probably my favorite game of the whole Elder Scrolls series. But, it's fascinating because smart contracts is actually the mechanism by which we take a lot of the meat space stuff and move it to the digital world. So all the stuff we've been talking about is really probably the mechanisms which take us there, which I find that world not dystopian. I find that world quite utopian because there's so many opportunities to create beautiful experiences. Lincoln said that nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. Do you think power and money can corrupt most people? And if so, do you worry of this corrupting force on your own mind? You're one of the leading minds in the cryptocurrency space. You're the leader of the Cardano project. You're the king
of the rats.
Does this corrupt your mind, both the power and the money of it?
Yeah, I mean, you see this most pervasively with people who inherit a large amount of money or title, dynasties like the Mellons or the Rockefellers or other people. It's the worst thing you can do to somebody is just hand them an enormous amount of power that they're not prepared for. And the challenge with this space is like everybody's young and we're all billionaires now and we have these cult followings and do all these things, right? And nobody really says no to you. Like, for example, I have this ranch up in Wyoming and it has 400 bison on it. So now I'm a bison rancher. Like if somebody was like, monitoring, auditing that, be like, Charles, do you have any experience taking care of bison? I'd be like, no. So you think it's really a good idea to have this ranch with 400 bison running around? What the hell are you going to do with bison? I just have to figure out what I'm going to do with these bison. So, and we'll make a video game. We'll do crypto bison. And you're going to get one.
I'm not pulling. Thank you. I would love to. I'm not pulling at that string just yet. So let's I'm wondering how you're going to connect this back to power.
Right. And so, but my point is that when you are unrestrained, like literally no one can say no, or you have the ability to distort reality around yourself and you're not constrained by social customs, it creates a situation where you start losing perspective. you're not grounded anymore. I think so. It's less of a question of will you become evil or not. It's more of a question of will you lose so much touch with humanity that you just can't relate or understand people, and then you inadvertently, by your actions, start harming people, either through the policies that you pursue or the things that you start building and so forth. So I think the best inoculation against that is to surround yourself with activities that are utterly divorced from your reputation and status. The best thing are animals and gardening. Because, a donkey doesn't care if you're a billionaire or broke. He'll shit on you exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And so there's a humility behind these types of activities and these things. And there's a honest work component. Like when you grow hay or whatever, you have to plant. You have to actually water, you have to irrigate, you have to actually be there. And if you can't use some excuse, well, I was meeting the president of El Salvador, I was doing this. Like, the hay doesn't give a shit. It's hay, right? So it grounds and connects you. The other thing is you have to get used to giving away. All the best things in my life have come as a consequence of first giving. Like I got started in the cryptocurrency space by giving away a free class, Bitcoin or How I Learned to Stop Worrying or Love Crypto. You did a free podcast, right? In life, if you give, and you develop that mindset of, I'm not attached to the things I have, and if push comes to shove, it goes away. Usually you get more back. Like I gave away all my ether. I never received any of 293,000 ether at the all-time high, over $1.2 billion. I gave it to my secretary. I had no idea if it was going to be worth anything or not, but he kind of got shafted. And I was like, well, they don't like me, so they don't like you by the transitive property of relationships, so you're screwed. And he's like, well, I'm going to go back and my wife is probably going to divorce me and all this stuff. And what do I do? And I said, well, I'll give you my ether. I don't know if it's going to be worth anything. So, he's doing pretty good. But then again, regardless of doing that, I now have Cardano. I have this great career. I've done all these amazing things. So I think that's the single best way of handling power is you have to do things to keep yourself grounded. In case of Washington, he was deeply connected to Mount Vernon. During the Revolutionary War, he was like sending letters talking about the irrigation ditches and the barn and things like that. He was always connected to that. And then also develop a mindset that you're only here temporarily. Everything you have is finite. It's going to go away at some point. No matter how much you want to keep it, you will die and somebody else will have it. So you live for the next generation. You don't live for yourself. You look to the future and you say, what am I going to leave behind? What am I going to transmit? And then in that kind of mindset always forces you to be more gracious, cooperative, and collaborative with people. All these dictators, they are egomaniacs and they get connected to these fantasies and they live for themselves. Look at Xi in China. He's unraveling a power structure that was what made China China today. After Mao, they said, we probably shouldn't have another one of those guys. And so they said, let's build something where there's checks and balances and no one person is going to run the whole show or else it'll descend and regress and we'll have problems. And then what he's done, he's thinking only about himself, not the best interest of China. So he's systematically unraveling a system they've been embracing for over 40 years. And to what end? After he dies, the next guy who comes in, even as he's super competent, the next guy is going to horrifically abuse that power structure. And the same thing happened with the Romans. After Augustus, the great emperor, then suddenly down the line you have Caligula and Nero and all these other terrible emperors that just destroyed everything that the Republic and the Empire sought to achieve. So you have to think for the future. You have to think in institutions and systems. You have to have things that ground yourself. And you have to be fully prepared to lose everything and give up everything. After I left Ethereum, I had nothing. Okay? Reputation was damaged, not a lot of money. Nobody really wanted to work with me. No one picked up a phone for 2 whole years. It was horrible. And so I was a bedrock in that experience. And now look at where I'm at. I built all the way up to that. And so that wasn't by accident. I had to surround myself with amazing people. Why would amazing people want to surround themselves with me? If I was this narcissistic asshole who just was like, it's me, everything would be a transactional relationship. It would be, okay, we'll get as much as we can and then run away as quickly as possible. Instead, it was, I'm going to invest in you. And maybe I'll win, maybe I won't win, but I'll be the last guy to leave the boat. If we're freezing to death, you get my coat and I'll just deal with the cold. That kind of mindset. You have to have that. I got that from my dad. He got it from his father. My grandfather and great-grandfather, my dad said, grew up in Montana, and they were like products of the Homestead Act. very rough Montana. You know, a lot of people died and froze to death up there, or eaten by animals or something, or shot by their neighbors, and nobody investigates anything because it's Montana. So the only way you survive is by taking care of each other and being a good member of that community. And if somebody gets big, you have this implicit desire to go and give back and take care of the community that you came from and invest in that community. Like, I came from the mathematical community. I never completed a PhD, but one of the things that I'm doing is I'm going to put $20 million and set up a center to do automated theorem proving. And we're going to heavily invest in lean because I'm super excited about mechanizing math and making a machine understandable. Now, I know all these guys who do this work. There's like all these mathematicians and computer scientists, and no one pays attention to them. And they're kind of like the redheaded stepchildren of mathematics, and they live on the boundaries and periphery. Meanwhile, they're super passionate and they absolutely love what they do. And if only they had the right resources, within 50 or 100 years, what they're doing can probably become the dominant model of how to do mathematics. So I'm now in a position where I have the financial means to take care of these guys. So all I have to do is just call them up and say, hey, would you like to work with? Oh, absolutely. And cut a check, and it's done.
So the interesting tension here, so we talked about ways to prevent power from corrupting a human being that's in a leadership position. There's a interesting case in the cryptocurrency space of Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto that's basically doesn't have a leader. So the benefit of a leader is somebody that perhaps even when they don't carry power, maintains a little bit of a flame of vision. I suppose Bitcoin has that with the original work by Satoshi Nakamoto and the sort of that, even though it's anonymous, the idea still lives on through the community, but nevertheless, the leader is anonymous. Do you think this is an interesting case study about leadership? Is for the leader to maintain anonymity.
It was a saying from Sun Tzu, paraphrasing it, the best leaders are felt but never seen. Yeah. So I think that's exactly right. The less the leader can be in the room and the more the principles of the leader are in the room, the better for the firm, because what you're doing is creating more leaders that way. You're inspiring the next generation, the next wave, the next circle out to act with those principles, but contribute in their own way and their own flair. And so you gain collective intelligence.